I will be your presenter for today. Today's topic is going to be covering some basics and tips and tricks in surfacing using Creo Parametric. Okay, this is a standard parametric surfacing. We're not going to be covering freeform surfacing that is seen in the module of ISDX, the Interactive Surface Design module. So before we get started, if anybody has any questions, there is going to be a questions box in the GoToMeeting panel on the right side of your display. So if anything pops into your mind, just go ahead and add it into the questions box, and I will answer the question toward the end of the presentation. Should you notice any kind of problems with the audio or the video, please also text that in there, and I will make sure that I check that from time to time. I want to make sure that everybody can see and hear me. So before we get started, let me make sure that there are no questions. Looks like we're doing well, so let's go ahead and begin. So we'll start off talking a little bit about NextRev, moving on to some of our upcoming power hours as well as our archived power hours. We'll talk a little bit about some of the courses that we offer both here at NextRev as well as courses that can be offered at your facility, and then we'll dive into surfacing. We'll talk a little bit about some of the problems people have with it and how Creo can help. And we'll have about a 25, 30 or minute long demo, and then we'll go over the recap, talking about what we did in the demonstration. And I'll definitely give some time for a little Q&A toward the end. So a little bit about NextRev. NextRev has been working with PTC for a little over 13 years now. We are here specifically to support you in the needs that you have for not only your CAD tools like Creo Parametric and Creo Elements Direct, but as well as any type of Windchill, Intralink, or PDM Essentials issues. We have well over 75 years combined knowledge here at NextRev, and we are always able to support you due to our local presence. Now, the beauty of working with NextRev as well as PTC is if for some reason we are not available at NextRev to assist you, you do have a second line of support, which is PTC. So if you do run into any problems or questions, by all means, reach out to NextRev, but always send an email to PTC as well. This way, should it take us a couple hours to get back to you, maybe it'll take PTC a little quicker, a little less time to get back to you, or vice versa. We just want to make sure that you get the support you need as quickly as possible. PTC also does offer support 5 days a week, 24 hours a day. So some of the power hours, if you are new to today's power hour, we welcome you. If you have been coming to these power hours for the past decade, well, that's fantastic. Keep coming to them. They're getting better and better every single week. These power hours are customer driven. Should you have any questions about something that you'd like to see in Creo, whether it's maybe what's new in Creo 2, Creo 3 is coming out, so maybe that'll be a big topic coming up. This is where we get our ideas for these power hours. These are the questions that come in from all of our customers. So should you have any questions, please shoot us an email, and maybe we'll turn that into a power hour. We have a number of power hours coming up, so please go to nextrev.com/training/power hours to register for the upcoming power hours. If you are curious about some of the older ones, we do archive those on YouTube. It is a private channel for NextRev customers, so if you are interested in seeing some of the older videos, please drop your sales representative a line. If you do not know who the sales representative is, you can go ahead and email sales@nextrev.com. and we'll make sure that we get that email routed as soon as possible. NextRev is PTC's sole partner for training on the entire West Coast. So not only do we do all the training for our own personal customers, but we are the sole provider of training for PTC customers on the entire West Coast of the United States. You can see some of our training classes coming up at nextrev.com/training. You'll see a number of these classes available on the PTC website. However, just note that even if you do not see a training class that you are interested in, please shoot us an email. Just because they are not listed on our website does not mean that we cannot offer these classes. We've also worked with a number of companies who may hire on a new user, and this new user needs to get trained on not only the Introduction to Creo class, but maybe advanced assembly as well as surfacing. So now we're talking about 3 classes totaling a little over 2 weeks. No company has time to lose an engineer for 2 weeks. So we do have the ability to offer streamlined classes specifically for your company and your engineers so that we can knock that entire class out in under a week. We can do these classes on site at our Santa Clara or Southern California facility, or we can also come on site. So I think we can all agree nobody likes a bad surface. The number of problems that we can get by creating surfaces in Creo is we can see poorly merged entities. We can see tangency that is lacking, curvature continuous problems. You know, if we're working with a C2 curve or a G2 surface, how do we actually make sure that that curvature is actually a curvature continuous spline? How do we make sure that we can even turn this surface that we've created into solid geometry? So we're going to go over a number of these features here in Creo. In fact, one of the big questions I always get is how do we create text or a shape on a 2D plane, wrap it onto a surface, and then actually turn it into an offset material when you're working with solid geometry. So we're going to go through a number of excellent demonstrations of all these problems. And ultimately, what that's going to give you is the surface that you're looking for. We're not going to see breaks in tangency between one surface to another. We'll see smooth, flowing lines. Using the Creo Parametric interface, you're also going to notice, if anybody is new to Creo Parametric, you'll notice that this is a very, very straightforward interface. This is not like the old Wildfire series where things were buried in menus. In fact, what I've done for this presentation is there was a fantastic example way back in the Wildfire 3 material that I have actually streamlined for Creo Parametric. We'll talk about that when we get there. Before I move on to the demonstration, I do just want to pause for a moment and make sure that nothing is on fire. It looks like we do not have any questions. I trust everybody can see and hear me. So without further ado, let's begin with the presentation. Okay. So I know what you're thinking right now. This is a surfacing presentation, and for some reason I'm starting with a sketch. So we'll dive into that in a moment. However, if anybody here is new to the Creo interface, I just do want to take a step and take a look at the interface. If you've been using the Wildfire series in the past, you'll notice that there's a dramatic change. Okay, this interface is very similar to the Microsoft Ribbon user interface. In fact, it's more than just a passing resemblance. This is actually licensed from Microsoft for use here in Creo Parametric. Those of you that are brand new to Creo Parametric and have been using Wildfire for many years, that's fantastic. There is a little magnifying glass here in the top right. If you type in something, for example, let's type in family table. You know where they are in Wildfire 5, but maybe in Creo you don't know where they are. This is called the command search. Anything that you type in the command search, it will show you in the interface. There are only 2 commands that have changed names, and those are both in sketch mode. One is the use edge tool is now called project, and the line tool is now called line chain. Otherwise, all other operations are called the same thing. Maybe we have some SolidWorks users out there. That's fantastic, because whatever you call something in SolidWorks, let's say you're looking for a loft. Creo does not have a loft. Creo has a sweep. So if you were to type in loft or type in fillet in this area here, you would find Creo pointing to what it is called in Creo. So the ramping up from going from a SolidWorks proficiency to a Creo proficiency is incredibly short. I cannot demonstrate that, as that is a configuration option, and if I change that, then I can't find Creo option. So you have to change a config option for that, but it's very easy to do. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Here we've got a sketch. Nothing crazy. In fact, what it is, it's a sketch of a C2 curve. And I've put in some parameters here. I've got a datum point there and a datum point there. I want to make sure that the curve stays within that datum point. And I've also got a datum point here in space. Okay, it technically isn't space. We've got some geometry that is tying this curvature to this datum point. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to double click on the curve. Okay, this will put us into edit mode. If you used the Wildfire 5, this was called edit definition. And I can very easily drag these around. Right here. I can drag these curves back and forth, and please note that they are staying even. Okay, what I've done is I've applied a constraint so that these numeric values of this point to this point and this point to this point are equal. On top of that, if I go ahead and edit the definition of the placement of this datum point, let's go ahead and click on the datum point, double click on that. If I change its placement, notice that the curvature is changing on the end of this curve here. Okay, so let's go ahead and see how I did that. Just going to roll the model back a little bit. Okay, replace this datum point here. Push out a little further back. There we go. Put it right there. All right, and let's roll back. Okay, so the first thing that I created is a box. Let's say this is the corner on a phone. In fact, that's kind of how I figured out this particular presentation, is I've worked with a number of product development firms that are working on phones. So if you do have maybe an HTC or an iPhone sitting right next to you, take a look at the corner of the phone. If you are used to creating C2 curves, you'll notice that there is really no transition between the flat faces on the corner to the actual corner round. It's a smooth transition. At no point is there a sharp edge or change in the slope. So to do this, what we're going to do is I'm just going to sketch. In fact, we'll turn our datum planes on so you can see what's happening here. We have the entire outline of the phone. And then I created an angled line here, which is 45 degrees from each edge. I just want to make sure that I do have a center line, basically. So let's go ahead and sketch on this datum plane. And please note that I have my configuration set so that when I sketch in Creo Parametric, it does sketch with the sketching plane parallel to the screen. This is a configuration option, so if you do not configure it, by default, you will be sketching in 3D. Okay. This icon right here will convert it into a 2D sketch view. But if you prefer sketching in 2D, this is simply another click that you don't need to do. It is a configuration option under File, Options, Sketcher. Right here, make the sketching plane parallel to the screen. Check that box, hit OK, and update your config.pro. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start by creating a line. I'm actually going to hide my datum planes right now. And I would like to create a line from this reference line to this datum point. Unfortunately, I forgot to reference it. So I'm going to press Alt. Okay, if you are familiar with Creo, you know how this works. If you are not familiar with Creo, this is brand new to the Creo tool. Pressing Alt while in a tool, I'm in the line tool right now, will allow us to pick references. I'm going to pick that point. Keep holding Alt, press Control, and this will allow me to pick a second point. Let go of Alt and Control at the same time, and now we have two reference points. So I'll go from there to there, complete that, and from there to there. Okay, next what we're going to do is we're going to add a spline from this reference point to this reference point. Okay, doesn't look like much of a spline, I understand. What we're going to do to it is come over here and apply a constraint. So I'll go to tangent between this arc, basically between that spline and this line, and then tangent from this line to this line. Okay, so now we have a nice standard curve here. That is not good enough for us. I'm going to double click on the spline, And oftentimes people will right-click, on an area here and add a point. I'm not going to do that. There's a tool that I find everybody kind of overlooks. It's here on the left. Okay, this is going to put us into polygon mode. What that means is we can edit the values of the spline while not in the spline tool. So I'll click on this, and then we add control points on the reference lines, not on the spline. See, I'm right-clicking on the spline, nothing is happening. Right-clicking on the line, and we'll get add point. Okay, so I'm going to right-click there and add a point. Right-click here, add a point, and I'm going to complete this operation. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this line. Well, first things first, we have a problem. Okay, this is not how I want to actually have this. Well, this might be what your prerogative is. In this case here, it isn't. I want to have a constant angle here. So what we're going to do, and there's a few ways of doing this. We can make this line tangent to this line, but what I prefer to do is use my equal constraint and say this value and this value. Okay, I'm going to make this 10, and I'm going to do something wrong on purpose. Okay, so there's 10. Notice how it turned red. I have a configuration that will allow Creo to automatically lock a dimension when you put a value in. So next we'll go equal this value and this value. Okay, we'll make that make this 10 maybe. I'm just going to get rid of this thing real quick here. All right. Now, if I want to come in here and actually drag one of these values, I'm not able to. Notice I'm trying to click on that little vertex. It's not working. The reason is because this value is locked. Just make sure that you, if you do have that configuration setting set, that you unlock it. Okay. So now, great. I am able to move this, and we do see that we have the values changing equally on both sides. But now I want to address this guy here. It's not working for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say coincident between this line and this point. Now, the reason I did this is so that I will be able to change the values of that point and then have it affect the entire curve. Hope that makes sense there, but don't worry, we'll deal with that. I did notice that this point and this point are a bit off, so I'm going to delete that, drop in a new value. Actually, we'll cancel that. That was right, actually. Okay, so we're going to complete that operation there, and here's our curve. Okay, now what this is going to allow me to do, if I double-click on the curve, okay, I can change these values like so. We saw this earlier. However, should I want to change the curvature of the actual spline, query the datum point, double-click on it to go into edit mode, and now we can specifically hone the curvature of the spline. Okay, so let's take this one step further. I'm going to grab the spline, go to go to analysis. We're going to go to our curvature tool. And I may have picked an incorrect point over there, so let me go ahead and actually fix that real quick. Let's go back to edit our sketch. And let me just, oh yeah, I see I picked that point instead of that point. Not a problem. Let's change that real quick. All right, there we have it. Okay, so I'll pick that spline once again. We'll go to our curvature tool. And I've got it a little bit exaggerated here. Let's maybe tone down the scale just a bit. We're in the wrong direction, all right. There we go. And we can increase the quality as well. Now, I'm going to go ahead and save this. See, we have quick and we have saved. If I save this, complete the operation, it stays there. This is kind of nice because I can come in here, double-click on the curve, and I can edit all of my points. Okay, so I can kind of move it in, move it out, and see what the curvature looks like. This nice, smooth, flowing curvature here simply means that we do not have a harsh transition between flat and curve. Should this be a standard round, what we would see is a spike, and then a constant curvature, and then a spike, and then flatness again, no curve basically. Now I can also come in here. I'm going to query that point again, double click there, and then I can further hone the curvature that I'm looking for. In fact, if I push it back down, we're kind of getting close to what a standard round would look like. It's still a little bit nicer than a standard round, but here we see a fairly sharp transition between zero slope and constant slope. And what we want with a nice curve is something along the lines of that. Okay, nice smooth transition. Is there an exact value we can give it? Not really. You know, here we're simply using this graphical tool to figure out what the smoothest transition that we can get from flat to a round. Okay, and then at this point here we can go ahead and complete the operation, and we can use this curve to create solid geometry. The beauty of using this versus a C2 round is you have a lot more control over its final shape. Okay, let's move on to our surface tangency. So I've got a shape that I've created here. It looks beautiful. Let's go ahead and see if it really is. I'm going to go to back to my analysis tab, and I'm going to take a look at, maybe we'll use the good old reflection test. I'm going to grab that surface and that surface and that surface. And let's spin this around. And we can see, notice this area here where there's a break. Notice the sharp change. Let's see it right about there. Notice the sharp change right there in the reflection. Okay, this is seen a little bit easier if we go to shaded curvature. Grab that surface and that surface, and there we have it. Notice the sharp break. Okay, the reason for this is although we started off with some tangency in this swept blend here in the rear, it did not follow. This is just a sweep. It did not follow through. So what we're going to do is we're going to fix this. I'm actually going to roll the model back. I'm going to get rid of this sweep. I'll just put a brand new one in. So go back to model and go back to sweep. And I'm going to click this as my origin. I'm going to press Control. And actually, I want to convert it to a surface first. Pick a surface, press Control, and grab that edge and that edge. So under References, I've got my origin, and I've got, I'm basically going to start normal to the origin. I can change that. But what I want to focus on, people typically miss this. In fact, you know what I want to do? I'm going to show you something a little bit better here. I'm going to go back to my sweep. I'm going to edit the definition of the sketch. And I want you to see something here. The definition of the sketch is tangent at this point to this edge at this on this plane. And then here we've got an angular value. All right. So that's not what I'm looking for. What I want to do is come over here, pick that, go back to surface. Oops, wrong one, excuse me. Actually, no, let's go take a look at this real fast. Notice how we just have a vertical and a horizontal reference line. Okay, that's not going to cut it for us. We want to make this a little bit smarter. So we'll go back to References, and I'm going to grab this edge and this edge like I did earlier, but I'm going to hit this tangency checkbox under chain 1 and under chain 2. Grab that guy there. Chain 1, chain 2, tangency. Okay? Now under tangency, we can confirm that because we see chain 1 and chain 2. And I'll show you how that's going to change the sketch in a moment. The next thing I want to do is I do not want to have this sweep normal to the origin. See, we have origin, and then the N is checked. That's normal. What's going to happen is when it's normal to the origin, it'll kind of end it up at an angled face here. So I'm going to say constant normal direction, and it's looking for a datum plane there. Okay. This is not necessary, but it'll kind of give it a more finished look. Now we can sketch and watch what happens. Now we're giving tangency. I'm going to orient it a little bit nicer there. And we'll go to a conic from that datum point to that datum point. Now watch this when I drag it up. Tangent and tangent. Right there and right there. Now this is tangent to the surface, not the edge. Complete the operation, complete that operation, And let's take a look at our reflection. Take that surface and that surface, and we have a smooth reflection. We do see that line still because these are two independent surfaces, but the transition between both surfaces is perfect. Okay, next we're going to talk about a surface wrap. And this is one of my favorites. I'm asked this question all the time. So the scenario we have here is we would like to project a logo onto a curved surface here. Okay, how do we do that? It's not too tough at all with a surface. Here I do not have a surface. Here I have solid geometry. In fact, this is imported solid geometry. So what are we going to do? Are we going to copy and paste every single surface to create the surface region that we want to work with, or are we going to just work with what we have? So what I'm going to do is start off, I'm going to try datum planes on here. I'm going to start off by projecting a datum plane off of this datum. So I'll grab this datum plane, go to New Datum, drag it down a bit, and I'm going to go from offset to parallel, press Control, and I'm going to grab this inside face right there. And let's make it not through, but tangent. This part is critical. You have to make sure that you have a tangent sketching plane on the surface that you want to project onto. So I'll hit OK. There's my datum plane. I'll pick this plane once again, click on Sketch. Go ahead and hide the plane. Actually, before I even do this, because this, to me, I'm not a big fan of working on hidden geometry. I've got a section that's already there. I'm going to activate that. This way, I don't have to look through stuff to actually sketch. It's there, ready for me. And let's pick this plane again, and let's go ahead and sketch on it. That's better. Now I can actually see what I'm sketching on. Okay, so what I'd like to do here is go ahead and actually rotate this thing here. That's better. And I'm going to use the text tool, create a little bit of a text down here, and I'll make this salesy Creo. There we go. Okay, it's a little bit to the left. Let's just increase the aspect ratio. Okay, that's fine. I think it's a little bit better to have it on the right. It'll demonstrate a little bit nicer. All right, so that's it. Just some text on a plane. And we can reorient everything here. And just remember, the plane is not the face. It's just tangent to this face. Complete that operation. And we're done. That's all it is. Nothing too outrageous here. So I'm going to click on the text, and we're going to edit and go to wrap. Make sure it's wrap, not warp. Pretty close, those two, in spelling anyway. Click on wrap. Okay, and what's going to happen here if I complete this is basically a failure. I'll show you why. Resume this, little arrow, flip it around, make sure that it's wrapping in the correct direction. Okay, so it's just projected this onto the surface. It's wrapped it, excuse me. It hasn't projected it, it has wrapped it. Complete that operation, and there we have it. Now, this part seems a little bit strange. What we're going to do is we're going to sketch yet again on this surface. There is a shortcut, but I'll skip that for the time being. I'm going to sketch that on the surface here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use, rotate it just a tad, I'm going to use the project tool. And remember that project used to be called use edge. We'll do a loop. I'm going to grab this text, that text, and there. And it's going to project it onto that plane. Close that. Okay. We can see now that we have text once again on this plane. The next thing we're going to do is we want to grab some surfaces. So I'll just go to quilt. I'm going to pick, oh, it's not a quilt, excuse me. We have to do this by hand. Activate the solid that you want to work on. hover back over it. The Smart Selection filter takes over. Grab that surface. Do it again. Solid, that surface, press Control, and that surface. So just kind of the same surface that I actually want to have Creo on. We're going to click on Offset. And we are going to offset the text. Let's grab the text. Now come here. Oops, this one here. There's our text. Give it a moment. All right. And what's going to happen here, I think the thickness is a little bit off. Let's make it a little bit bigger. There we go. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and offset this thing. And it might take a moment for the geometry to appear. It can take a little bit of time because this is kind of a complicated piece of geometry here. So we'll just bear with it a second. Okay. Actually, it looks like I just got an email saying we're having some video issues. Is everybody okay out there? Making sure that we're not actually having any problems here. Okay. Can everybody see the screen again? Okay, very good. Sorry about that. Happens from time to time there. All right, let's go back over here. So we've got our sketch right there. On the okay, this is the projected sketch. We'll go back to our offset. Okay, you want to come in here, grab our surfaces. So make sure that you do grab the surfaces on the plane. 1, 2. Okay, offset. We will snag our geometry right there, and it should project it onto the surface. And just to make sure that it is going in the correct direction there. Okay, there we have it. So I'm going to try and zoom in kind of close so you can see how this is happening. It's projecting normal to the text. Okay, we may or may not want to do that. In this case, what I want to do is actually change under options, and we say side surface normal to surface. So give it a second, and we see that it changed. I'll go back again. Sketch and surface. All right, so we'll complete that. Okay, and there we have Creo. I'm going to do that one more time. Delete that. Pick your surface, 1, 2. Without picking the surface, offset is going to look for quilts. So you have to pick the surface first and then go to offset. And the option is this little guy right here. If you hover over it, it says with draft feature. So pick that one. We lose our surfaces. Oh, we have them right there. Okay, so our sketch. Oh, I may have rolled the model back a bit there. I think I deleted the whole. There's offset. Let's go ahead and get out of there. Let's do that. That's better. Let's just roll it back. Okay. Pick the one surface. 1, 2. Offset with draft feature. Pick the feature. If you do not get a preview, it may be going in the wrong direction. So flip it over. And definitely give Creo a minute here, especially on more complicated shapes or more complicated surfaces. Go ahead and go surface, complete, and there we have it. Now what I'll do is I'll go ahead and reactivate the top part of my model. I'll have my datum planes and points or my axis on there. And what we're going to do is I want to go ahead and group offset and datum. Here we're going to group those. Yeah, offset, group. get rid of datum 4 is in the wrong spot. Group these, and we can actually mirror it, or sorry, even create a pattern, axial pattern around the axis. Okay, we make it 2, complete that. Let it regen. Okay, so we have a total of 4. We have 1 there, 1 there, 1 there, 1 there. All right. And our last example is going to be kind of a big one here. So what we get kind of often is shapes that, or surfaces anyway, that will not solidify. So let's try and make that happen. I'm going to grab the surface. Actually, let's go ahead and use quilt. That'll be easier. Grab the quilt, go to model, and it's offset. It's offset a total of 2 units. Okay. So it's failed. Why has it failed? The reason it is failing happens to be in here. Once this curve and this face and this curve begin to intersect, the geometry begins to overlap, so it's not going to work. So we are going to have to work around it. I'm going to go pick the entire surface. We are going to click on offset, just like we did earlier. However, we can actually exclude certain surfaces. I'll click on access before I do that because I'm going to forget, I know it. I'm going to flip this around, make it back to 2. Okay, and then right-click, exclude, roll it over, and I want to get rid of this little embossed area. So I'm going to grab that surface and just press Control. There's about 17 surfaces, so you have to watch me click 17 things. And that one, flip you over. There. So I've gotten rid of all of those surfaces. Now, before you hit OK, make sure that you actually create side surfaces right in here. All right. There we have it. The next thing we have to do, again, pick the quilt, the top quilt. Do not pick the one that you just created. Pick the top one. Again, go to Offset. Now, again, before I forget, flip it around. 2 units. We are going to right-click again and exclude the other ones. This one, this one, this one, that one. There's 6 of them. So get rid of all the other ones that you did not get rid of earlier. Complete that. So now we have offset 1, or in this case it's 3, but the first offset, the second offset. Now what we're going to do is piece them all back together. So we're going to start off by going to, make sure quilt is active, it's a little bit easier. This surface, press Control, and this surface, and click on Merge. Do make sure it's merging the correct ones. So flip that around, flip that around. Okay, that's one. What we're going to do is piece all the different surfaces back together. So this was the inside surface we created first, then this surface that we created second. Now we want to attach that quilt to the edge. So again, pick the quilt. So we're going to quilt, press Control on that quilt, and back to Merge. Okay, again, these are working properly by default. Complete that. And lastly, this surface, or that quilt, press Control on that quilt, the original quilt, merge a 3rd time. Okay. And lastly, pick the one quilt, because now only one exists. Did I miss something right there? I hope not. Oh, I just overlapped it from the original surface. Okay. And now we can solidify. Okay. Let's go ahead and do a cross-section. Slice through this thing here, and we see that we have now been able to solidify this object, which earlier was not going to allow us to actually chop it open, or I'm sorry, to add more material to it. It was a few steps. We had to make a couple of offsets and then piece them all back together. Very, very straightforward. Okay. So we started talking about splines. And again, the reason why I did the spline over doing a C2 curve or C2 round is because the spline tool gives me more accuracy. And as long as you provide the proper constraints for either coincidence or having something actually tangent to something else and having equal values, you will be able to create a spline that is equal on both sides of it. Now again, you don't have to do that. Maybe you want to have the spline sharper on one side than the other. That's not a problem. You can always do that. You did not have to use those datum points. I just preferred the datum points there because for me it makes it a little bit easier to control the curvature. Also, those datum points could have been datum points from a skeleton model. Don't forget that we had the geometry selection under the spline tool. That is typically overlooked. When this is active, you are able to edit the spline within sketch mode. So that surface blend tangency, okay, we started with the object in the bottom right, which had that break between the top surface and the bottom surface. What we did is we went ahead and created a spline using this inside line here as our origin and the outside lines, the outside lines to follow. There was that option to create tangency between this line and this line here, and when that put us into sketch mode, we had our tangent surface lines. That ultimately gave us the example here on the bottom where we do not have any kind of blending issue. We then did our wrapping. So to wrap, we simply start on a datum plane or surface that is tangent to the surface that you want to wrap on. You create your sketch, you wrap it to the surface, you then create another sketch on that initial datum plane and project the text from that plane or from that wrap back onto that surface. Once you do that, you are able to use your offset tool to select the surfaces that you want to work with. Again, you must select these surfaces. In this case here, I had imported solid geometry, so it was important to first select the solid geometry and then query the surface. Once the queried surface was selected, I can say, I can select the text and then project it onto the surface. And you do have a couple of options for its embossing, whether you want it normal to the sketch or normal to the surface. And the last one was solidifying. We took the geometry or surfaces that was failing when we were actually solidifying the model and did the offsets in 2 stages, not a single stage. Once we did that, we were able to piece everything back together using the merge tool. Once that was all merged back together, we simply grabbed the single surface quilt and we're able to solidify them. Okay, at this point here, if you have any questions, go ahead and add them into the questions box. I wish the box was a little bit bigger for me, so give me a second here. Okay, first question was, is this part of ISBX? No, fortunately, I never did go into the freeform surfacing tool, excuse me. I never did go into the freeform surfacing tool. This was all base package Creo parametric surfacing. In fact, there is a class coming up on this. As I look at my calendar here, it is June 11th that we'll be covering this and much more, all based on parametric surfacing. Again, this is surfacing within the standard receipt of Creo Parametric. Okay, it looks like that is about it. Well, thank you all for joining me today. If you do have any questions about some of the archive power hours, you can email sales@nextrev.com. If you do not know your sales representative, then we can get you a link to the archive power hours. Again, thank you for joining us today with surfacing using Creo Parametric 2.0.